Hello family and welcome. This is African Esquire TV. I am your host, Tierney Cherie. It has been a long time. I have been off, had a baby, as you all know, and I had to take some time off because of that. But I'm back on YouTube, I'm back on my channel, and most importantly, I'm back on my new platform, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. First, obviously, if y'all can see, I have a little someone here with me. I was really trying hard not to record with him. However, I'm learning that I just have to make it work because I tried so hard to get him to sleep today. And finally got him to sleep, and as I'm getting ready for the broadcast, 3 minutes later, he wakes up. So, especially until his grandma comes back to help us, comes back from Ghana to help us, I'm definitely going to have him with me while I'm doing videos. And then the other caveat is I really did want to do a lot of live streams, particularly on African Esquire TV. However, because I have a newborn baby, it's not going to work. I've learned, to have live streams when I don't really have help. So until I get some extra help, for now, probably until November, I'm not going to have too many live streams, if I have any at all, honestly. So I'll be recording videos and chopping them up like I usually do. Before we get into today's subject, because, I've been taking a break, and I really do have a lot that I want to talk about, and I'm going to go back a little bit with today's subject. But just to explain with African Esquire TV, so if you don't know, whenever I left YouTube, I had started a new platform, decided to start a new platform. And shout out to everyone who sent me advice through my email on different things I could do as far as starting my own website. So that's what I decided to do, and I'm also still going to post on like Black Junction TV. I'm done with Facebook. That was the stance I made because I think when you look at Facebook and the things they have done, particularly with whether it was Minister Farrakhan or even reporting to the government numerous times, and we know also that the Israeli government has been getting information from Facebook on groups that they deem anti-Zionist. So there's just a lot of freedom of speech concerns with Facebook. So because of that, I decided I'm not going to do Facebook anymore. And, while I'm still on Twitter, realistically, any day people could shut you out. They could end your account. On YouTube, I really believe there's going to be a day when all of us activists who are on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, everything, they're going to shut us down. It's coming, trust me. So I decided to get ahead of the game and create my own website. Now, I know it's easy to view me on YouTube, so a lot of people, I imagine, are still going to view me on YouTube. I would ask that if you are someone that's really loyal to this cause, that you follow me on my channel, in my website. And the thing is, I'm doing this for free. I've had people donate. Thank you so much to everyone who donated to the website so much. I really appreciate. And if anyone still wants to donate, there's a link down below, because as you know, websites do cost money. But I'm giving this content for free. I'm not someone who believes in doing subscription basis, because this is information that I want everyone to have. I don't want it to just be people who have the means to pay for it. And thanks to all the people who do have the means and who do contribute, but not everyone has money to give to certain causes, especially if this is something for Black liberation. No one should, in my opinion, have to pay for it. So because of that, I just ask that y'all would subscribe to my website. And that way, when the day comes, whenever the day comes that stuff starts popping off, if my channel were to be taken down, if my Twitter were to be taken down, I could know that, hey, everyone subscribe to my channel, to my website. I keep calling it a channel. Everyone subscribe to my website, African Esquire TV. So also as an incentive, before I post on YouTube, I'm going to first post on African Diaspora TV the day before I post my stuff on YouTube. So that's one incentive to watch the videos on my website instead of my channel, because I can upload to my channel instead of YouTube, and I'll upload there first. The other incentive is I'm also going to post different articles. I might write an article or two, or give my thoughts on something, write up something real quick that I will only post to my website. So these are just the incentives to try to get, people, I know YouTube's a lot more convenient, but if you can subscribe to my website, and also just check my website, like you check my YouTube, and if you don't have time, I understand, but if you do, those are the incentives I'm going to give for that. So what are we talking about today? So a lot has happened since I was on break, and there's a lot of times I wanted to jump on YouTube, but as you might know, when you have a baby, I thought I was going to have a lot more time having a baby, and, it's funny, like, the women in my life are like, no, you're not, and I'm like, yes, I am, because I've always just been a multitasker, but the thing is, like, having a baby, it's not only physical, but it's very, like, emotional, and you're just trying to get some type of, finding yourself again. So, that's one of the reasons that I couldn't just jump on YouTube, is that I had to just be in a good mental space to give to everyone. But one of the things that I did want to talk about is there's this video that came out from the Ghana president. Now, if y'all don't know, previously the Ghanaian president, he has already spoken about the colonialism in front of the president of France. The president of France is Emmanuel Macron. If you don't know anything about him, he's very much a neo-colonialist. He is very much someone who is very bold in that, hey, we're basically here to take from Africa. And, he's been very much condemning of Africa. For example, the African population is rising at a higher rate than the European population, in fact, higher than any other population in the world. And he has criticized Africans for that, because, the ultimate fear is that, well, if their population gets so big, how are we going to control immigration? Most importantly, how are we going to control these people on their own continent? Because it's easy to control people when you can try to do divide and conquer, but when you have the population booming out of the window, good luck trying to convince people that you should have their diamonds, you should have their gold, especially if a lot of those people are starving. So, and you have a lot of people who will have a lot less to lose. That's the other thing. So Macron has been, very, just neo-colonial in a lot of the things he has said, and a lot of the things he has done. Now, he previously had the Ghana president. He came to Ghana, and the Ghana president was very much talking about the fact that Africans should not be dependent on the West. And this is something that is so obvious. Obviously, if Africa is the richest continent in the world, when you look at the mineral wealth of Africa, when you look at the land, when you look at all of the raw materials, Africa has more than any other continent on the earth. So the fact that Africa is dependent on people who don't have the mineral wealth of Africa, that's something that is shocking. So he said this in front of the French president. And I'm sure you guys have seen this, and I had an old video I talked about it. Like, the French president was very much upset. You could tell it on his face that he was, how dare you say that, you're not going to be dependent on us, because he knows that the day that Africans no longer depend on the West is the day that the West is going to have to panic and figure something out, because that dependency, it's a weird thing. Like, they're making you think that you're dependent on them for development, all the while they're taking way more from you than they give to you. So it's very, like, reminiscent of, like, welfare. You could be on welfare and you think the government's doing something for you, but the fact is, if you and I'm not someone who believes that, people on welfare, they necessarily choose to be on welfare, but some do. And let's say, all those people who are dependent on welfare went out and actually started competing inside of certain markets, they would pose much more of a threat to white domination, especially if they try to discriminate against all of these educated people who actually have a reason to be given a chance, because you're going to have to explain yourself. Why are you discriminating against all these people who are on welfare? Very similar to that's what's going on in Africa. You have the African nations that are on welfare, and they're crippled because of the of the economic exploitation of Europe. But had the Africans gotten into a position where they no longer needed Europe, then they're going to pose a real danger to Europe. So that's the weird, thing that has been happening on the continent since European invasion, but really more so since the liberation movements. So as I said, we're going to play this video of the second time that the Ghanaian president, this time he goes to France and actually discusses the fact that Africa must be liberated from this relationship with Europe. So I'm going to play the video and then we're going to talk more.
The diaspora of the African diaspora is intimately linked with what happens on the continent. And Africa strong and performing transforms your position and your status here in Europe. But in Africa, which continues to live the narrative of poverty, hungry children, people going across the Sahara, going in rickety boats and dying in Lampedusa to get to Europe. That Africa is not a narrative that is going to help you over here. So I think between you and us, our main task is the transformation of the continent. And why do I say so? Just one simple example. The Chinese diaspora is supposed to be some 16 million people. And in the table of states, they constitute the 25th country in the world. They're saying that of the 52 billion foreign investment that went into China in the 80s and 90s that transformed China into what it is today, the manufacturing hub of the world, 50% of that, 26%, came from the Chinese overseas community. And that development of China that has taken place has changed the status and the position of Chinese all over the world. So I want you to take those statistics very seriously, because that is the transformative connection that we want to make with the African diaspora. How to implicate it in the development of the continent. Once we change the narrative about Africa, and we can only do it ourselves, we have to get away from the idea that there's some Father Christmas somewhere who's going to come and develop our continent for us. There is no such Father Christmas. There's just us who are going to be able to develop our continent. So, once that mentality is our mentality, that we have to do it ourselves, then our relations with other people become that much more structured and punctilious, if you like. Our relations with France, our relations with Europe. Our relations with Europe is a natural one. You look at the geography of the world, Africa and Europe are natural partners. There's just this small strip of water, the Mediterranean, that separates the two of us. So when you look at that, and you look also at the history that has gone on between Africa and Europe, that is a natural relationship and a natural alliance, but a relationship that has to be different from the relationship that we've had up to now. Why do I say so? That relationship has enriched Europe, but has not enriched Africa. So we need to change that dynamic. And we can only do it by ourselves taking the correct measures for our future. So that's where my focus is. And that's why I'm very excited about the possibility of having this encounter, that we can all begin to speak the same language, the language of cooperation, the language of collaboration, but to a different end. It cannot be right that the continent that has allegedly the wealthiest resources of all the continents of the world is also the home of the poorest people on the globe. That disconnect is not a good disconnect, and we need to work to change that disconnect. So when we're then talking about the need for self-reliance, it is because particularly important is to recognize that we have the resources. We have the youngest population in the world. 25% of our population is under the age of, 19. It's a huge amount of resource, of potential strength. And once we do the educating, we find the means to do the educating of this population and giving it skills, then we are putting Africa on a path of very, very strong economic growth. We can replicate what has been done in Asia if, like them, we maintain the discipline and the correct analysis of what we need to do to move our continent forward. But really, if they've been able in Asia in a generation to transform the lives of hundreds of millions of Chinese, hundreds of millions of Indians, why can we not replicate that same phenomenon on our continent? We can do it. And I have no doubt that those of you here can make a big input into that transformation that we're all looking for. And when we're saying this, and it's very important that we recognize that we're not saying we're turning our back on the world. No, we can't do that. We live on the same planet. We need the association and the partnership with countries like France, with the technologies that they have developed here, their savoir-faire in many, many areas. All those things are matters that we can profitably associate and benefit from. But all of it, always, from an understanding that it is for us to define the relationship that we want with the rest of the world. We shouldn't be caught up in a language or a narrative that says that we are appendages to other people's thinking, other people's policies, other people's volonté. That will not help us. So, Mr. President, we're saying the time has come for us to take our destiny in our own hands. It's now 6 decades since the independence movement swept Africa. And those who led it, did so on the understanding that independence would bring not just freedom as sovereign states, but would also provide us the base for the social and economic transformation of our countries. That still hasn't happened. But the pointers are all very, very positive towards the future. And there are several countries on the continent. I would get into a lot of trouble if I started identifying them here, as I should mention, and I won't mention anyone. But there are several on the continent that visibly you can see are on the right way forward for what we need to do. Well, in concluding, there's just one thing that I want to say to my brothers and my sisters of the African diaspora in this room. And that is something that perhaps when I hear the way in which there's a lot of concern about the status in France and barriers in France. But there's one thing that all of you should remember, and I hope that you will associate this with me. The destiny of all black people in the world, wherever they are, is bound up with Africa. Let me repeat that. The destiny of all black people in the world is bound up with Africa. And performing Africa elevates the status of all black people around the world. And non-performing Africa continues the situation where black people around the world are looked at. So,
the destiny of all black people in the world is bound up with Africa. And I've heard people say, oh, Pan-Africanism, oh, it's dead. Africans don't look at themselves, so many, myths. Africans don't look at themselves as African. Africans don't look at people who outside of the diaspora as being important. And yet here you have the president of Ghana saying that the destiny of all black people around the world is bound up with Africa. And, it might just sound good to you. Maybe you're saying, well, I don't know if I don't see that in my actual life. But if you think about it, the example that Nana Akufo gave, he gave an example of China. And, if you, don't know about China, at one point, China was not what it is right now. China was struggling back in the 80s. No one could ever have foreseen China passing up the United States, passing up Japan, passing up Europe. And yet China has passed up all of them to the point where China is now loaning the United States loans. And this happened because the Chinese diaspora, when they left China, they didn't forget home. You actually see that. You see people going into, Chinese people going into different neighborhoods, a lot of black neighborhoods, starting stores, and you're wondering, like, what are they doing? Well, guess what? They're trying to secure what they need for their family, not just in the country where they're at, but their family back home. And this is something that not even just people who are so-called African American don't have that same connect, but also people who immigrate from the continent of Africa. Most of them I recognize don't have that same connect. A lot of times, and I'm not saying this is never an all-encompassing thing, just like there's a lot of African Americans who obviously are connected to the continent, and there's a lot of Africans who left Africa who are connected to the continent. But more than I see those who are connected, I see a lot who leave the continent, and their mindset is, I'm here to get mine, I'm here to get mine, I'm here to get mine, and they don't show concern to the idea that I'm here to get something and give it back to the continent. And that mentality is what saved China from being a third world country today to being a superpower that has the United States, Europe, and everyone shook right now. Think about that. It's the mentality. And I'll tell you something, you know, when it comes to African Americans or Africans who immigrate to the United States, us who have citizenship here, if you think about the power of us being united, us who actually vote, you know, us who actually have a voice, us who actually have governments who pay taxes and have governments that are supposed to represent us, if you think about the power of us being united, and saying that we're going to actually defend our homeland, and saying that we're going to actually put power behind our numbers and actually try to do something about what's going on as far as the exploitation of Africa by the United States, that is something I truly believe that the U.S. government has always tried to prevent. When you look back at slavery, it was an intentional thing to try to get the African slaves to forget that they were African. They actually told them, you're not African, you're a Negro. You know, that's what you are. You're a nigger. You don't have an identity. That is something that they felt was so important. And it's interesting when you look at other places where slavery happened. If you go to the Caribbean, if you go to Latin America, there wasn't this heavy emphasis on getting the people who were enslaved to disidentify with their homeland. But America, which had the most brutal slavery and which really based their whole economy on slavery, and that's the reason why America could become a superpower today, they found it so vital to actually impress into us that we were not African, that they would not allow us to speak our languages. They would not allow us to do our cultural dances, our cultural anything. We had to try to mask it inside of their culture in order for them to feel like it was okay. So understand, that was very intentional. Why was it so intentional? Why did they think it was so important? Why could the slaves not understand that they were African and still be a slave? Because if you know where you're from, if you have an identity, then it's a lot harder for people to manipulate you. It's a lot harder for people to take you and make you do what they want you to do. But if you have that identity, if you have that sense of belonging, if you understand that your history does not begin inside of enslavement, that your history does not begin inside of poverty, that your history does not begin inside of being someone's nothing, inside of being someone who needs to be taken care of, if you understand that's not the beginning of your history, then you have a different idea of what freedom is. You have a different idea of what liberation is. And understand that when immigrants come here, and we'll use the Chinese, for example, because that's the example that the Ghana president used, they have a different concept of liberation. Liberation to them is not just coming to America and having, being okay for themselves. Liberation to them is liberation back home. That's why China became a superpower, because to them, they understood, as Nana Akufo said, liberation in China, or the destiny of them in America, is very dependent on the liberation of China. And that's the same thing that we have to understand. And that was just such a powerful quote. All black people, we must understand this. And so when you hear people say, oh, we're not concerned with Africa, Africa doesn't concern us, understand that it does concern you. You are very much in that, because the day that Africa is no longer a beggar, the day that Africa is no longer subjugated, the day that Africa is able to do for themselves, is the day that we can actually stand up and have some type of protection. Whenever you look at the things that are being done, whether you're in America or whether you're in the Caribbean or whether you're in London, we'll have protection because we'll have governments that are actually standing up, black governments, governments that are actually standing up and saying you can't do those to our people. That's what you want. You don't want the situation where you can have a white supremacist shoot up black people and we don't have any backing. All we can do is protest. All we can do is cry. All we can do is say, hey, please don't do that. Well, we don't have any powerful backing to say that, hey, you need to control this issue. Hey, y'all need to figure something out because you're killing our people. You know, imagine the response, you know, of like, for example, when the synagogue shooting happened, remember how strong the Israeli response was, not just in the U.S. but around the world. We want that same type of solidarity for black people around the world, but we're not going to get that if we're not free. We're not going to get that if we're divided. We're not going to get that if we're still living inside of these colonial, neo-colonial regions that are being controlled by people who don't really care about the well-being of black people, but instead care about their own selves. So that's the one thing I want to point out. Now, sort of a negative, you know, Nana Akufo-Addo, that's the president of Ghana. He is very woke in some ways, but we still have waking up to do. And the woke part is what's great, because what you're starting to understand is that it's not just him speaking like this. Like, he's not like a lone star. You see Africans speaking like this all over, whether it's Kagame, whether it's Malema, like you see whether it's like Bobby Wine, like all these people who are speaking up about the need for black people to have some type of liberation and freedom. There's a lot of waking up happening, and the thing is, once the consciousness of people get woke, it's very difficult to, you actually can't go backwards, you can only go forward. So we're only going to increase in our consciousness, but we have to stop thinking that these people who we're talking to, in the case of Nana Akufo-Addo, he went to France. Why the French president invited him back, you know, after he already, you know, spoke in front of him saying, you know, we want Africans not to be dependent. I don't know. That was his stupid blunder. But he went to France and said, you know, thank you guys, you know, for your charity, but we're not dependent on you. Now, understand, this is not charity. They want you, they need you to take that money from them. They need you to take this charity. They need you to take these loans. They need you to take it. If you don't take it, then they're not going to be able to sustain themselves. So that's the thing I think that is missing from Nana Akufo-Addo's speech, is that he doesn't quite get that this isn't just a passive, you know, oh, you know, please Africa, take from us, please, please. It's not passive. It's actually very aggressive. It's actually violent. It's actually to inflict harm on us for the benefit of their society. Understand that. You know, neo-colonialism is war. It's the same. It's the same as no colonialism is war. The same as slavery is war. That you're declaring war on. Oh, baby, sleep. You're declaring war on a people for mineral enrichment. When you think about, you know, actual wars, you know, rarely did you have a war just because. A lot of times, more often than not, the war was about some type of mineral enrichment, some type of entitlement to land, entitlement to something. And understand, this is the same thing. It's just being masked inside of this, you know, very sublime, you know, thing with corporations and with, you know, dignitaries and politicians who are masking it. But the results are the same. When you look at the state of Africa, you cannot convince me that Africans are not suffering the same they would if they had an actual war with these countries that are taking from them. They're suffering the same. When you look at the starvation, when you look at the diseases, when you look at the poverty, when you look at the you know, the discontentment, like when you look at the chaos, it's the same. So, you know, to our brother in Ghana, and I understand he's not like a revolutionary dude. He's just a woke politician. He's a politician who, I think more and more, he's dealing with things in the background. And he kind of sees, like, you know, oh, you know, they really have this situation where they're, you know, trying to get us to take this stuff from them. We need to stop taking stuff from him. I think he's a very common sense man. But the thing is, he has to understand is that this is not just a matter of, you know, they're so good, they're offering us stuff, but hey, we don't need it. No, they want you to take it. Like, read Confessions of an Economic Hitman and understand, if you don't take it, if you don't take these charitable gifts, then you are deemed a threat. You know, these are not things that they're trying to do out of goodwill. And so that's one thing I didn't like when he said, well, the French taxpayers are so benevolent. No. You know, first of all, French taxpayer, just like the United States taxpayers, we don't have a say in what happens to the money. The funny thing is, a lot of people don't understand that the United States is sustained from these types of things that are given to other countries. But we have to understand that that is the case, number one. And number two, if they stop taking our taxes and using it for these things, then the situation in the United States would look a lot different. Same thing with France. You know, they're not necessarily, oh, sure, give our money to these people. No, trust me. You know, when you look at how they're treating their African immigrants, you better trust me. They're not just giving money out of the charitable will of their heart. The government takes the money from them, and number two, they take it from them because it's really a matter of public stability. It's a matter of the French government being able to continue on living this luxury life that it already has lived. So, you know, I'm going to talk a little bit more, not in this video, a subsequent video. I'm going to talk more about what's going on as far as the immigration situation in France, because if you don't know, a lot of Africans, they go to France because France is very close to Africa, between Libya and France. It's not too far. It's a boat ride. It's a dangerous boat ride. My people, please, you know, don't take that boat ride, because, you know, it's the saddest thing when you're seeing our people drowning in the ocean, you know, babies drowning in the ocean, because we'd rather die trying to get over there than, you know, actually stay where we are and be revolutionary and die for something that's going to benefit everyone. You know, it's very sad. But, you know, the thing about it is, when you look at the situation with the immigrants, you know, they're very mistreated in France. A lot of them are being held at these facilities. A lot of them are facing horrible discrimination. And this is something that, you know, is also interesting, because France is so hostile towards their immigrant population. But they're also hostile towards former French colonies. So when you look at the situation inside of countries like Togo, inside of countries like the Ivory Coast, these are countries where the policies are so set up to deprive the people of money, the people who already don't have much, and give it to the French government. When you look at the colonial taxes, they're still taking money from the poor countries that they're so benevolent towards, and they want to help, and they want to do all these great things. They're still taking money from them. So if they wanted to help, if you want to help so much, this is how you know, like, it's twisted. If you want to help so much, stop taking money. Just stop. You know, just leave them alone. You know, you don't have to give Africa anything. Just stop taking. But they won't do that, because the fact is, they take so that they can get. So that's the only thing I will say about that. Africa overall, though, this is just one situation. Africa is definitely waking up. And my hope and prayer is that us in the diaspora will wake up. As the president was saying, like, we have to wake up, because it's a situation where wherever you are, I'll say, you know, for the United States, you know, we have all these things happening, all these things that show that even now, even after 400 years, our prospects in this country are not looking any brighter. At the same time, we have somewhere where we belong, and the prospects are endless. So why fight for something that is not bright at all, where if we can actually push for the liberation of Africa, that's something that won't just benefit us. We might not even get the benefits. Our children might have to get the benefits. Our children's children might have to get the benefits. But I'll tell you this, they'll have more of a benefit there than they will have in this country. And I'm saying that with all the things that are happening, as far as when you look at the prison industrial complex, as far as when you look at these mass shootings that are happening, these targeted racial mass shootings, when you look at what's happening, you know, just as far as like discrimination with mortgages and stuff like that, the fact that your child, I don't believe, is going to be able to walk around in the United States and not have to be afraid of being targeted by a white supremacist. So the prospects are so dim for us here, so dim. And yet, when you look at Africa, and Africa is certainly not a paradise, trust me when I say that. We have to deal with the fact that there's neocolonialism, and because of neocolonialism, there's a lot of people that look like us who are in control, who have power because they're being backed by outsiders. But the liberation of Africa is something that's feasible, in my opinion. The liberation of America, of blacks in America, that's always going to be dependent on the people who we live with, being good to us, allowing us to have access, And so far, it has been worsening and worsening. So the prospects to me are really dim there. So that's all I have for today. Again, African Diaspora TV, please subscribe. And guys, I'll see you in the next video.